our session, and I would like to introduce myself briefly. I am Sundar. I am a professor at the University of Utah School of Business, Eccles School of Business, and I'm a professor in operations and supply chain, and I'm also the director of the operations and supply chain program at the University of Utah. So thank you, USC, for inviting me here along with our amazing speakers. And we do have an amazing panel today, and I want to introduce each one of them, and then I'll give them a few minutes to, they'll talk about, introduce themselves. And so we have, on my very left, we have Hakeem Atwater, and we have Ryan Hoselton, right here, Brent Orsuga, and John Cordova. All right, so we can start with John introducing himself, and then we'll go from there, this direction.
Great, thanks, Sue.
Okay.
I have no fart jokes, so just thanks. My name is John Cordova, and I'm the Global Chief HR Officer for a group of companies called Growth Catalyst Group, and we're in the supply chain industry. I've been doing the people operations thing for more than 30 years, since I was 7. And on a personal note, got 2 brand new grandbabies. I'm very much into youth sports, and I'm the founding member of the Bleacher Coaching Staff, which is a blog that helps parents thinking about putting their kids in youth sports. And I'm very excited and honored to be part of this panel with these distinguished folks.
So I'm Brent Orsuga, based in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've done recruiting for 22 years, but the last 14 solely in logistics, the only sport I play. So I own a company, Pinnacle Growth Advisors, where really we focus in 3 areas of the industry. Let's call it number 1, the asset side. Number 2, we do a ton in the 3PL brokerage world, both domestic and on the forwarding. And then the last couple of years, especially what I'm going to call the freight technology sector. I think we all know how much that has exploded. So we place, or I even personally, thousands of people over the past decade. So from a talent standpoint, pretty well versed on what it takes.
Hi, I'm Ryan Hoselton. I am the Global Director of Talent Acquisition for Lululemon, and I lead all of our product creation and supply chain hiring. Prior to joining Lululemon, I worked at Abercrombie & Fitch for 14 years. At Abercrombie, I started in actually allocation and inventory management, built a big, robust training program there, and actually left Abercrombie as leading the corporate recruiting team in Columbus. Moved my family out here to California 2 years ago. I have a 6-year-old daughter, Delaney, 4-year-old son, Hunter, and a 1-month-old son, Brooks.
Wow.
So life is crazy. I'm happy to be here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hakeem Atwater. I'm coming from Atlanta, Georgia, hot Atlanta. So if no one from Atlanta, huh? You know what? I feel alone, and that's fine because we're talking about human capital and unleashing potential. Someone should have yelled when I said Atlanta, even if you're not from there. There we go. So I'm the CEO of a company called Unboxt, background in accounting and finance. Founded a startup with one of my best friends, graduate of USC. And this is a great full circle moment for us. When we first were getting started, USC was a huge supporter of ours. And then we even got one of you guys' valedictorians, and Tiana, who's over at our table. She was one of the early employees at Unboxt. So extremely excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome, thank you. So let me read out our title right there. It's a long title. Human Capital, Unleashing the Potential of the Next Generation of Supply Chain Superheroes, Exploring Opportunities to Find, Hire, and Retain Top Talent. So that's our agenda for today. So as we start off, let's first try to understand, what do we mean by human capital? What does that mean, especially to our students in the audience? This is important for us to understand. So let me ask our panelists, and we can go in any order we want. What does the word human capital mean, and especially to your organization, what does that mean to you?
Well, I'm on the end, so
Okay,
I'll
great,
start.
great, John.
Human capital is really the fuel that runs the entire organization. If you're very stats driven, then you think about human capital as the most precious inventory that you have anywhere across your organization. And they're the ones that make everything happen. You can have phenomenal processes, you can have amazing technology, But without the people part of it, nothing flows. So that's our definition of human capital, and that's what we stick with on the constant.
I think it's the most important part of any business, yet the hardest part to get right. And I think that that's why, you know, people like John and myself have built these businesses, is because companies need support and help. And even identifying what works, every company is different. You gotta look at it like sports. Every locker room is different. Every culture, every individual, every department. So getting that right is essential for scalability and success.
Our greatest asset, plain and simple. And as I think about our people, it's not only the people at the company, it's the collective that surrounds them. It's the knowledge, it's the relationships they have with the customers. It's the knowledge of your organization, and it's probably, as has been said here, the most precious and hardest to manage asset that we have.
So when I think of a human capital, let's just break it down, right? So you have human, right? That's character. So each of us, we all have our character, we all have our own behaviors and norms that we follow, right? That's character. Capital, that's your capabilities. That's your skills, that's your knowledge that you actually bring to the organization. And so when I think of human capital within the confines of my organization, and when I'm looking at hiring new people, I'm thinking about first, what is their character, right? Is this someone everyone talks about if I'm stuck in the airport? Beyond being stuck in the airport, I'm an introvert. I don't know if you guys can tell that at this point, but I'm a huge introvert. So 10 minutes conversation with me, it goes downhill after that. So for me is that I think about the first thing is that what is their character? So that's the human component. And then the capital component is the capabilities. And so as we go through the conversation, you invest as an organization and you provide capital so that way they're growing, right? Their knowledge they're producing for the organization. The human part you can't change. That's personal. So that's your integrity. That's your own walk and journey in life.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I think that's all important points brought up, and thank you for bringing up the ethical aspect. In fact, ethics is a huge part of business school education right now. At University of Utah, we have several classes that we have as a mandatory class for students, business school students, to take ethics, because I think ethics and understanding our moral compass and making sure that when we hire our human capital, we make sure that we hire people that have the moral compass in pointing in the right direction, right? At the end of the day, as our panelists pointed out, you know, our company is only as strong as our human capital. That is the foundation for every business out there. In fact, I would say human capital is a foundation for a country, because companies make up the country. And so, you know, our human capital is our foundation, and we want to make sure that we invest in that as companies. We invest in that knowledge that we have achieved. Even health. When we think about health of our employees, that is very much a part of our human capital. And so as bosses, as employers, as companies, as startups, you want to think about the health of your employees as well, mental and physical, both. So thank you. Let's move on. So now that we have, you know, sort of understood the concept of what human capital is, how do we unleash that potential in our companies? How do we do that?
I can start.
Yeah.
Something that's I see is a big trend right now is a reinvesting in our own human capital, and actually a move towards skills. Especially in our space, in the recruiting space, a lot of times we think about pedigree in the past, right? Where did someone work? What experiences they get? Tying those to success, right? It's really starting to shift in the industry, and we're really getting into a space where we actually need to skill or upskill those that we already have to really invest in terms of that growth and that retention. And so as in my case, we're really looking internally to say, how do we retain and grow the capital that we already have, and then really keep that retention for the long term, and looking at those as long-term assets, and not just someone who's moving from job to job.
I love that Ryan just brought in the retention piece of like human capital. So I would say the first thing is that the way you unleash it, you have to understand who you're dealing with, right? If you don't understand who you're dealing with, you're never going to retain them. You're never going to hire them. They're never going to be happy, right? And when you think of, again, human capital, when you invest capital into someone, if you don't know the human element, then you're just throwing money to the wind. So the first thing I think that you have to do is you have to understand who you're dealing with within your organization. And if you can do that, then you can unleash their potential, because now you can invest in what matters to them. You would understand what skills they even bring to the table. Like if you think of the 80-20 rule, and I'm not talking about David Goggins, I know I'm a huge fan of him. Someone else up here maybe as well, he does extreme sports as well. The idea of the 80-20 is that Gallup talked about 20% of people feel like they're even using their schools in their day-to-day jobs, right? So what about that other 80% that you're not utilizing like their strengths? So you have to first understand what they bring to the table, probably through the hiring process, probably through the onboarding process, and through conversations that you're having with them. And then from there, you invest in those capabilities, those skills. And if they aren't skilled, then maybe you have to have a conversation with them, but that's also a part of being a manager and a leader of your organization.
Yeah, and I mean, I come from an angle of, a little bit different where why is it so easy for me to pull people out? What do I hear when I'm taking somebody from one organization to another? And a lot of times it's just the lack of vision, that a company has not given that individual enough of a runway where they can see themselves being there for another 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And that's one thing that from a company standpoint, I would ask everybody is how clearly is that vision and purpose of what we're trying to accomplish clearly articulated to these individuals? Are they clear on, okay, if I start in this position, what that could lead into in the future? Because if they don't see that, what are they going to do? They're going to contact somebody like myself, or try to think that they can obtain that somewhere else. And we can get into generational changes as well, but we live in a very fast-paced world where now 18 months is almost the new 5 years. So you are going to see this job movement, and it's not going to be such an abnormality, but if you do not give them the foresight and they can understand that they have kind of a home here, they're going to go somewhere else. That's just the reality.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to what everyone's saying with a little bit of a different spin. I think that if you think about the term unleash, it means at the end of the process, right? When we unleash talent, we're talking about unleashing them on the public, right? On our customers, on the folks that they impact. For us, it's about preparation to unleash. What do we have in place? You know what keeps me up at night? What keeps me up at night isn't the recruiting process. We find talent. We find talent like nobody's business. The hard part is keeping them in play and making sure that we have the processes in place so that from the onboarding to the training to the career pathing to everything else that happens up until the moment they are unleashed in their job, all of that has to happen first. And unleashing is just kind of the reward. It's what happens, and we get to see them in the environment that we helped create for them. And that's how we actually approach that entire question.
Can I add one point to that? So Brent and John hit on something like really powerful. So Brent talked about like the cost, right? If you don't get it right. And John talked about like the end in mind, right? By raise of hands, we've all probably had different jobs in here. How many people sat down, went through the interview process, finally got that job of your dreams and said, damn, I can't wait to quit 6 months from now? Anybody? Oh, I see 3 hands.
There's more coming.
Okay. Right. So, but the reality is that is abnormal. Most people are excited when they get a new opportunity.
Yeah.
So the question you have to ask is what happened when they left? So if you don't have feedback loops within your system throughout your process, from onboarding to the day 1 on the job, to day 30 on the job, till they retire on the job, if you don't have feedback loops in there, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Because no one goes through that arduous process and says, I'm going to quit tomorrow. That's not a reality. So you have to understand, go back to the understanding of what they want. And if they're not getting it, that's when they leave.
Yeah.
Well, I think you bring up a great point where a lot of companies, I don't understand it, but they do these exit interviews. Oh, you're leaving. Well, why? It's too late. It doesn't matter. How many companies are doing stay interviews?
Right.
How many companies are approaching their people at 3 months, 6 months, 12 months and saying, hey, we like you here. We see a vision for you here. What's working, what's not? And, you know, because these people, you got to understand, in most situations, they're still intimidated to raise their hand. They don't know if they have necessarily a voice. But if you're proactively going to them, what's working? What do you think? What can we course correct? I think companies would be blown away at the feedback they get because I hear it indirectly.
And you know, we talked about that prior. Great conversation. The reality, though, is that the environment today means that we're doing more with less, right? And as leaders, we buy into the fact that people, human capital is the most precious inventory. But then guess what? Work gets in the way, right? And we forget to have the one-on-ones, or we cancel the one-on-ones because work got in the way. And so it's incumbent upon the leaders to make the time to take care of that most precious inventory. I was in jewelry for a long, long time, and I would never imagine receiving a piece of jewelry in inventory and then just kind of tossing it aside, letting it sit there and get old and collect dust and have people step on it. So why do we do that with, it sounds preachy, but why do we do that with our people?
Right.
Because they're our best and most precious inventory.
In fact, it's proven time and again that it's more expensive to hire, to fire and hire new employees than it is to retain your good talent. And so going back to these guys' point, you know, try to find out why they're still there. 6 months, 12 months, 2 years in your company, what's working for them, make it anonymous so they feel safe to talk, safe to speak up. So that safety is important, right? And so finding out what people really think and what do they need? What kind of support do they need? Because at the end of the day, it's easy to let people go, good people go from your company, but we have to remember, economically, it's much more expensive to let people go and then hire new people, train them, get them on board, and then have them leave again. It's a very expensive cycle there. So let's learn. So I would like to talk about now, how do I find, if I'm running a company, I'm the CEO, COO, CFO, how do I find, or Chief Supply Chain Officer, right? How do I find and hire the top talent, and how do I retain them? What tips do you have?
I mean, I'll start there because I think we live in a different world. I think the days of hiding behind a Word doc job description and a static website are done. We live in a visual world. I'll go even more granular. There's a book called Hook Point, which says that you have 3 seconds to catch somebody's attention in this scroll error. A lot of things that we teach companies is, do you have a movie trailer mindset? Think about what a movie trailer is. It's 2 minutes of a glimpse into something where you say, yes, I want to see it, or no, I don't. 2 minutes. How many companies are doing that internally? How many companies are showing a visual day in the life? How many companies are showing employee testimonials so people say, wow, I look, feel, see, I relate to that person? This is what you do to magnetize these individuals in, where companies just call what I call post and pray. You post a job and you pray someone good falls in your lap. Those days are gone. You have to be proactive, not reactive, and make it visual to relate to these people.
I also think that pipeline is the operative word. It's a constant. It's like, it's not an event, it's a lifestyle, and you have to maintain a pipeline of candidates, and you have to stay in touch with them, and you have to reach out to them. I mean, we were talking earlier that we've had folks 7 years ago reaching out saying, hey, can you find me a job? Or hey, I'm perfect for this position. So it's about having the pipeline available to you at all times and thinking of it as an ongoing part of the work. It's what I do every day.
I have these conversations a lot with leaders, and I always ask some of the same questions. And it's really tied to having a talent plan. Where are we at in your organization today? Are we going to buy? Are we going to borrow? Are we going to upskill? What levels of your organization actually need the most attention, are at high risk? That's when we get into conversations of actually funneling candidates for those roles. What skill sets do you have within your current workforce that you have the most gap or risk? And what would it take for us to go find and close those gaps? What I don't want to hear is like, I'm looking to hit these job requirements. I'm trying to fill this, put a butt in this seat. We're really looking for a long-term talent plan and strategy because that's what candidates are going to need to be hooked. And it isn't a post and pray. It is actually extending your organization to be one large recruiting organization. That's something I've always worked hard to do. I am not the one just out there trying to recruit the talent. Actually, the managers, the people on the line, are out there really living our employer branding every day, networking, and really working to build sort of their own networks that can help funnel into the organization. So we really try to extend ourselves through the business and get away from the old post and pray methodology.
I would say, personal sense is that there's two ways that we've done it. First thing is very strategic, right? USC, my co-founder, she came here, she finished her 5-year degree, went to the engineering school. We came back, we were thinking about starting a concept. I pitched her, I said, you're leaving Goldman, trust me, we're gonna change the world. She was foolish enough to say, let's do it. And then she joined me, right? So that's the strategic thing where we built a relationship with USC. I went to Morehouse, much smaller school in Atlanta, Georgia. She also went to Spelman, that's where we met. So that was very strategic. We built relationships with certain institutions that had the skills that we wanted. Now, the unstrategic thing that we both actually do is that we take calls from telemarketers. When we were looking to hire salespeople, biz dev reps, we took calls from telemarketers. When she would go to Starbucks or I would be in the line at Wendy's or Wingstop or wherever, I would be paying attention to how they treated me. How did they make me feel? And if they made me feel great, I would absolutely, and I have done this, hire them. I went back and I said, hey, look, how much are you getting paid at Wingstop? Only because now I can like boast a little bit. I could pay probably more than Wingstop. But if they were at a larger institution like an Amazon or something, I would establish a relationship and then I would build trust with them. And then I would say, hey, look, you know, like we're changing the world. Do you want to be a part of this? So there's two sides to it. Like there's one side that, yes, your institution may have relationships with certain organizations, but on the other side of it, just be human. And at the end of the day, we're in the trust business. I don't care what you sell. I don't care what industry you're in. You're in the trust business. You're building relationships with other people. And so I want to work with people that I can trust, because if I can trust them, I'm pretty sure that our customers and our partners will trust them as well.
And another thing we spoke on before this was the mindset of like always be hiring. One of the biggest things that we see companies mess up is they hire out of necessity. Oh my gosh, Jeff left, Sarah's leaving on leave. And then people go into scramble mode, right? And I think companies grossly underestimate the amount of time that it takes from phone call number 1 to start date, let alone in summer when you're chasing calendars all of a sudden. But if you're always hiring as well, this gives you the opportunity not just to add seats, but upgrade seats. And when you're always hiring too, you're speaking to the floor, you're speaking to your company that we are a high-performing team, no mediocrity, and we're always going to be adding or upgrading people. And I think a lot of companies mess that up.
And one thing to add is that also be a good person that someone wants to work with. There's someone on the panel, I'm saying this very like, because I know a backstory, that if you're the type of person people want to work with, they're going to want to come and work with you. You may go to another organization. I think the new norm is 18 months is the stat that people are going to go to other organizations. One thing is that I love about PwC in my time there was that they always knew that it's about a relationship. So they treated me, or at least for me, my personal relationship with them, they always treated me like a human the entire time. So what does that set them up for is that if we continue to grow, and this is me being excited, and we get to a certain point, we have to get audited financials, who do you think I'm going to call first? Is that institution. So it's the same thing with hiring too. Like remember, people do not forget how you make them feel. So I don't know if someone wants to.
I think that's such a good point because at the end of the day, exactly, you remember how somebody made you feel, right? Not what you were wearing or even what they said. You don't remember what they said, but you remember how they made you feel. And I tell my students all the time, graduating from our programs, who are going on to become business leaders of the world, be a good human being. Have your ethics in place. Have your moral compass pointing in the right direction and be a good human being. Be a kind human being. Everybody around us is dealing with some problem or the other. Everyone. And at the end of the day, how you treat people with respect. And please understand, everybody in your organization is important. Everybody from the custodial staff to the C-suite. Everyone in your organization has importance and should be treated with respect and importance. Please, let's not treat people differently just because they are below us or above us in the hierarchy of our organization. Let's quit doing that because your reputation as a human being goes much further. It makes you happier as an individual, right? When you're nicer to people, makes you happy, but also helps you create relationships. When you're looking for that job, when you pick up the phone or you email people and say, I'm looking for a job, believe me, your goodness, people remember that, and they will go out there and they will bat for you, and they will go out there and get you that job because they remember how you made them feel. So just keep doing that as you're moving on. Okay, so now that we've gone through, or maybe we're still going through the pandemic. I think we're still having the discussion, is the pandemic still on? Are we done with COVID? Are we not? But how has COVID changed how employees look at things? What do you guys think? Like, has COVID changed the workplace for you guys? Has COVID changed anything? And how has it changed our workplace?
Yeah, it absolutely has changed. I mean, to a degree, the prisoners ran the prison. Think about all the stuff that we went through. Great resignation, 4-day work weeks, quiet quitting. This is stuff that my antennas went up and I went crazy hearing. But, there used to be a formula when it came to remote work. Productivity gave you flexibility. A lot of us older generations, we came up that way. Everybody got a taste of it. Who would not like it? Who doesn't want to go on a Peloton at noon, pick up their kids at 2? We understand the world changed, but what happens is, there has to be an adaptation. Right now, we've seen a big push. We can get into the remote versus hybrid, and the world's changed as far as that goes. But I think there's a massive still expectation difference between what the companies want. Yeah. We see this massive push for back in the office and what the employees are looking for.
Yeah, I think we approach it. We were remote pre-COVID. That's how we operate, and we still operate that way. And the reason that we operate that way is because we go where the talent is. We've got folks for example, in 26 different states. We've got somebody in North Dakota. Why? Because that was the best possible fit for the role we needed to fill. And instead of having them reload to LA, which is expensive, they can stay in North Dakota, right? And so the concept was, be hybrid if you need to be. Now there are jobs, for example, one of our companies is a 3PL. You can't pick, pack, and ship from home. Not very effectively anyways. And so that's different. So you've got to understand what the roles are. My point is, why create a blanket statement? Everybody has to be back in office when maybe the best productivity that you get is from somebody remote. So know your people, like Hakeem was saying. Understand who they are, how they perform in the best environment for themselves, and be flexible in that process. It's so much easier to find great talent when you're thinking about what's best for them versus what's best for us necessarily. Because typically, what's best for them works out best for us in the long run.
It's a big push and pull in the corporate space right now. You see it actually a lot in data. There was a study of about 3,000 folks that were looking to change jobs this year, and 1.6% were open to relocation. And that's been a steady decline since the mid-'80s, when it was about mid-30% of folks were relocating when they took a new job. And the return to office piece is probably the piece that's been trickiest in my space, as talent is just not willing to move like they were before the pandemic, valuing things that they didn't realize they valued, right? We had time at home. I met someone who said, I'm never going to miss a family dinner again. I didn't realize all I was missing out on until I had that in COVID. It was like, I'm going to be remote now. We're good. And I think that sentiment really is out there. But there's definitely a pull. We have a lot of real estate, right? We have office space. Connection is important. Being in person is how we get the work done. That is the traditional sense. And there's definitely a push and pull right now. And recruiting gets kind of put in the hot seat of trying to be the voice of the talent to the team that's really hoping to bring everybody under one roof.
But if I could ask, show of hands, how many folks are on site at their job today? Okay, hands down. How about remote? Man, it's about even.
Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you for that informal survey response.
A follow-up to that question, how many of you who are online or remote have had pushback from your companies?
Oh.
Okay, maybe some of you do have pushback and not raising your hand.
I think we have a question.
Right?
Yeah.
So like, You know, read my face. I can't raise my hand.
Yeah.
And I read your face, so that's why. I read
It's
you.
like my boss is right beside me. Why is that?
Yeah, come on. I can't raise my hand.
Hey, what are those underwear called?
Yeah.
Shreddies.
Shreddies.
Yeah, but wait till you get home. Not good. I think we have a question.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon.
Yeah.
So much of your conversation was talking about the employee experience and work culture. How do you build culture remotely? How do you make employees feel connected when they're not in the office? How do they build the rapport with their teammates if they don't see them except through a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting? You know, those, transactional events versus the natural events where you get to know someone on a personal level.
Such a great question.
That is
Thank
a great
you.
question.
One thing.
Just 1 second. Can you have you introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah. I'm the person who leads the people that are not happy about working in the office. Just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Gina Willard. I'm a vice president at Northrop Grumman Corporation.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
All right.
I was going to say one thing, I'm just trying to give an experience share. One thing that I've seen companies do in that regard, if they're going to embrace remote and it is what it is rather than hire one-offs here and there, they've actually done what I'm going to call new hire training classes. So maybe it's on September 5th, you give everyone there in a new batch, they fly them into the corporate office for even a couple days and kind of build that culture and camaraderie there. So if nothing else, you kind of have two sides of the coin. You may have the company culture, but you may also have a kind of a bunch of group of individuals that have a connection as well. And I've seen that kind of work in a very positive way also. But honestly, what you explain is very hard because the reality is being in a room is as much about an exchange of energy than anything else. Him and I sit in a room with a whiteboard, we're going to get some stuff done. It's hard to do that remotely. And to answer your question, I don't think anyone has fully figured that out yet, to be honest.
All right, thank
I
you.
mean, Zoom happy hour is very helpful.
Well, yeah, we actually did that. So we have
no
a
joke.
management club. We, had online events, especially during COVID, right? We got really creative.
Yeah.
But we have hired thousands of people, right? We're growing. I'm in aerospace and defense. And one of the challenges that we hear from employees, although they prefer not having to commute and being able to be a present parent or exercise whatever their hobbies are to be, have a work-life balance or as much of it that they can, they do miss those in-person interactions. And so we've been trying to recover our culture because we do need innovation. We do need the camaraderie to drive, provocative thinking. And we're seeing a disconnect in some ways where, people do want to connect in person. And how do we accommodate that?
I think there's a way to tie those needs that you have, the provocative conversation, and you're talking to HR people here, so be careful. The innovation, driving innovation, and those types of things with rewards. So for example, you can have, if you can afford to do this, you can have quarterly trips to get together somewhere.
Yep.
You bring people in, right? And they're the achievers. They're the ones that met XYZ standard. They were the innovators. They were the ones that asked the provocative questions. They were the ones that disrupted the business in a really positive way. And so you bring them together as a group and you highlight it at the party. And you talk about this disruption and how cool it was. And that word spreads, right? And then it makes people more engaged. You guys know this already. It makes people more engaged, and the results tend to just blow up. So that's one option that you can consider.
I would say intentionality. Like a question I would pose back to you is, have you asked your team the same question? Like, what do you want?
No, because I'm an essential worker, so we have to be at work, and I work in restricted areas.
Right.
But no, I was being funny, but we do ask them what do they want, and it's mixed, right?
Yeah.
Because we have hybrid situations, so sometimes people come to work 2 or 3 days a week or certain hours of the day.
Yeah.
We've been very flexible. But at the end of the day, they still want that human connection, so trying to bridge that gap has been a challenge.
Yeah, my feedback would probably be is ask them what they want, and you've already done that, And then this is what I love numbers, is that if 70% says we want to go to Dave & Buster's, and another 30% say we want to go to a dog park and play with someone else's dog,
Psycho.
pick, right? And which one would you probably pick is the 70%. And then you communicate that with the group, the audience, and say, hey, look, guys, we got this feedback. This is what you guys say you wanted. This is why we're going to do it. But that's the first step. That goes back to understanding it's not that difficult. Right, just ask them, hey, what do you want to do? Most people, sensible people, will say, hey, I want to do this. But now you have to act as well, right? So you have to get the feedback, but then you have to act on whatever feedback you got from them. But it is difficult when you're thinking about, I think you said you guys are growing rapidly, 1,000 people. So what works for one group may not work for another. And that's fine, because as a large organization, there's going to be subcultures that thrive. And you have to allow those subcultures to thrive. And build an organization that's agile enough that they have the capabilities to thrive. And they have to have the green light as well, so that's leadership.
How many folks?
I think.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, and then how do you control the narrative, right? Because it's people make assumptions, perception is reality, and if you're not together, and we all have communication teams that take a different focus by site, by program, or whatever the strategy is to try to give people information and keep them on the same, accord.
Yeah.
But with remote working, how do you, protect that and make sure that people aren't speculating and they have access and insight to what's important to what they do?
So there's this idea of like when you communicate, right? And a lot of times we judge ourselves based on our intent. So like if I do something, I know my intent was in the right manner. But if you do something, I'm gonna judge you based on your behavior. Because I don't know your intent, right? And so the only way for me to understand your intent or for you to unveil it is for you to communicate that with me. And so you have to create an environment where both the top-down, bottom-up strategy, the bottom in this scenario feels comfortable being transparent and sharing that feedback, and at the same time, the top also feels vulnerable in sharing the feedback and is not scared to make the wrong decision. But then if you make the wrong decision, just communicate, hey, sorry, we really messed up. But this is how we're gonna go forward. So I think a lot of things in organizations can be solved with just communicating, just talking to someone else, like we're doing now.
Have you had employee-led culture clubs?
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's two parts to those, right? They sound fantastic, but if you aren't employing your opinion leaders, they aren't the leaders. They're the people that people listen to.
Correct.
Right?
The influencers.
You're not going to them. Yeah. They can be very, very toxic, or they can be a godsend, right? And so if you've employed those folks on your culture club, and you communicate with them, it's less people you have to communicate with. But you get them on board, and they're the ones that they're the evangelists. They're the ones that are spreading the word, and they'll come back to you with insider information, right? And you can head off a lot of the issues that you might encounter. I don't think that there's a perfect answer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of practical, tactical, right? That we can try, and it's just a matter of trying different things until you hit on something, because every company and every individual is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But that was a great question.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Why you got to be so tough on us?
Hey. You guys can handle it. Thank you.
Thank you. How much time do we have?
20 minutes.
Okay.
2 hours more.
Guys, you have to fill us up with questions now. All right, what other questions do we have from the audience? All right, Ron. Okay, we have another question there. Okay, go ahead.
How we doing, guys? Hey, very lively discussion. Thank you so much. First time I've heard David Goggins mentioned at a supply chain summit, so stay hard. Thank you for that.
There we go.
I'm Jeff McDonald. I'm EVP of N&R Global Logistics. I have my our amazing human capital here today at this table, so wanted to recognize them. So yeah, we want to upskill and educate as much as we can. So I just have a question about the philosophy I think Tony Hsieh at Zappos made famous, where you kind of hire slow and fire fast. I think he actually gave people an incentive to leave after 90 days. Do you feel that 90 days is enough to make that type of an assessment? And how do you feel that impacts the culture of the organization positively and negatively if you kind of have a bit of churn like that. So thanks.
I think you get a sense way before 90 days. But I think to be fair to the individual, 90 days is about right. Because if we don't have the processes in place to get them ready, the onboarding and the training and the clear vision that's communicated and they understand, then they're bound to fail, right? But 90 days seems to be about the right time. But let's face it, we've all hired folks in a weekend, we're like, what did we do, right? So hire slow, fire fast, great philosophy.
I agree. I think you know on day 9, not 90 to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I think it all boils down to the root problem, the recruiting process itself. What kind of questions are being asked? Are you identifying a skill set, a mindset, a habit of the individual? Like, do you know how this person's wired? But there's a great book that everyone should buy called The First 90 Days. It's an actual book. And what it talks about is exactly that. It's the onboarding. Look, recruiting brings the people in the door. And until reality, we pass them off. What is the onboarding? One of the questions I always ask companies, somebody starts Monday at 8 a.m. What does it look like? Okay. What about 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? Like, what does that look like? We've all been in those shoes where we've started a new gig. We don't know what we don't know. We're literally, waiting for people to kind of coach us and advise us through that process. So I really think that companies need to embrace the onboarding more than anything else. That's another function of the process. Getting them in the door is just one aspect of it.
I completely agree. The question was like, what's the onboarding look like? Because 90 days could feel quite unfair, honestly. I came from an organization in the past where we just invested so heavily in emerging talent. So to the point where we started actually tapping into universities in their freshman year. We had a freshman forum, and we kept getting earlier. It's like we got to get top talent early. But part of my career journey was actually building a training program where I didn't care if you went to a retail program for school. If you were an English major, whatever, we were going to give 6 weeks of training to you when you came in the door. So we were hiring on behaviors, and we were hiring on potential, and then we were really skilling. And then that skilling actually was really something that was carried through someone's entire employee life cycle. So it's an entire foundation built upon growing and developing, not around buying talent externally. So it was almost in the inverse of we need 90 days even to get this person into a good spot. But once we have them there, look at the potential of where they can really go. And so that's just another point that I think in the recruiting space is often about finding that perfect person. Well, there's not a perfect person, not a perfect individual out there, right? We do unicorn hunting a lot. And the reality is it's about the investment that we're putting in on the front end. We're trying to identify what are the skills that we're looking for in that person and how well can we assess that for success. And then what are we going to do when they come in the door to really set them up and allow them to unleash their potential.
That's a great point.
So I'm going to have to take a slightly different approach and say it depends. So I guess I'm taking the middle ground. Going back to the human capital, right? The character and then the skills. It's very difficult to hire in today's marketplace someone who's extremely skilled and talented and elongate that hiring process to 6 months so I can really see your character, right? It's very difficult. So when I make a hiring decision, if in 30 days it's character that's in question, and not just in question, I know that you are setting a foundation that is not the culture I want within my organization, you're gone.
Right.
There's no questions asked. I'm sorry. Pack up. You're gone. It's not going to happen. If it's the capital side, their skills, their capabilities, now we can have a conversation, right? Because now it's role dependent. Is this something that's like a surgeon that I need you to be able to operate today, and I don't have 90 days or 6 months to invest in you? Or is it something where I can invest the time and resources in you to build you up to where you can produce in the role? Because going back to that equation, the human part, that trust component, that character, that's difficult. Capital, I've learned this from like my investment banking days, and I mean anyone that could chew gum and walk at the same time could have done our jobs. That was the reality. But the character, you can't teach that. That's something internal. And so that's why I say it depends. If it's character, gotta go. It's gonna roll culture, trust, and everything else. Everything you're trying to do from feedback, it's not going to happen because they don't trust their manager. My manager's going to fire me if I'm honest. I love my CEO, but my manager, I just don't trust him or her, right? So that you can't teach, but the capital part you can invest in.
And I want to add one thing, because you said, how does this speak to the floor, right? What does it tell to the culture? I think there's 5 words that every company should write down. You are what you tolerate. You are what you tolerate. If you tolerate mediocrity, if you tolerate people coming in late, if you tolerate average performance, you're speaking to the floor anyways. You're saying, that's who we are. That now becomes your identity, what becomes your culture. So I think to answer your question, getting rid of people that aren't a fit, there's no ego here. Business has no emotion, right? Not in an environment like we're in now. So you are what you tolerate. That's a thing that people really need to embrace.
I think somewhere we also need to talk about nepotism, right? In companies
happens.
too. So, you know, we probably see that around you where people are there because of who they knew in the company and they were hired for that reason.
Yep.
And we're tolerating them just for that reason, right? So, Ron, you had a question next, so if you can ask
I
a
think
question
she was here.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw
She's been
Ron's hand.
patient.
Okay, great. All right. go
Sorry.
ahead.
Hi, my name is Madeline Singh. I'm one of the master's candidates for the cohort 11. I just want to thank you guys for having such a great discussion about like unleashing the potential of human capital. On the other perspective, from us students who are looking to probably look at new jobs or different places of employment, what are some indicators of success that a company has unleashed their human capital, like that they're investing their time? Because for a lot of us, we often only have a chance to get to know the company through recruiting events or through interviews. So how can we observe that the company is actually doing what they're saying?
I think when you interact with some of the folks, understanding what their career has been at that organization, seeing folks with longevity that have actually not made just moves up the ladder, but have taken steps to the side as well to try getting new, robust experiences, and finding what values they actually see in their organization. Asking this question: what values do you actually enjoy most about your organization? If you could change anything about it, what would you change? Really understanding the narrative there, you'll be able to feel and see authenticity, and understanding through their experiences in that organization. I think you can learn a lot about the culture. And recruiters, we do a pretty good job of like spinning a really nice narrative. You know, I always encourage folks to lead with radical candor and ask really tough, transparent questions, and you'll be able to see through really what an organization is standing behind.
Thank you.
I would say tactically, have you tried to like ask for a referral? You have? There you go. That's the way to do it. There's so many candidates that just don't ask for referrals. Like, I want to talk to someone that is working the job that I'm working, that was working that job, that started that job 3 years ago. Let me talk to that person. Let me talk to someone that's a new hire, that's been on the job for 90 days or 6 months or a year. Let me have a conversation with them. Now you get both viewpoints, right? If the recruiter or the hiring manager or whoever just puts you off and says, you know, don't worry about that. You've already met them, right? That's probably an organization, I don't know. It could be for a number of reasons, right? But ask for referrals. Like, talk to the people who are that have lived your day-to-day for 3 years, for 6 months. And then you'll get probably a good picture of like what to expect.
I'm a big believer in shadow days, right? We're recruiters, we're sellers, it's what we do. We tell you how great everything is and it's gonna be amazing. But when you can get into a day in the life, right? Like, hey, I just wanna come on my own time, dime, whatever, and just kind of sit here. Because what's gonna happen from your perspective, you're gonna use your senses. What do I see, feel, touch, smell, hear? Is this an environment that I'm gonna wanna be in? Number one. Number two, success stories, right? Give me an example of 4 or 5 people who started in my shoes and tell me exactly what they went. And also another question I think people like yourself should ask, how do you hire, fire, promote? I wanna know those answers.
I think, yeah. No, so I just want to add one more thing here. As a faculty and director of my program in Operations Supply Chain, one of the things that we do is we have a very close alumni family. And so, you know, reach out to your alumni family. You know, your program has been there for so long, and you know, you don't even know that, but you you have an alumni in every major company out there, except for maybe a startup that just started. But you probably have an alumni out there. Reach out to them
That's a good point.
and create that alumni family, be part of that alumni family, because that way, we've actually had great success in our alumni coming back, and we have actually meetings twice a year where alums come back to the school, and we invite alums from different companies, and they hire our own students back into those schools. And so we've had 100% placement rate because of that reason, is because we have our own alumni family hiring back our own students as future employees and colleagues. So you want to tap into that.
One last thing, I'd back channel on LinkedIn. You know who works there. Tap some shoulders, see who responds, see what the real scoop is too. Why not? You have nothing to lose. Yeah, it's not illegal.
So we had.
I think he was next.
Yeah.
Was I next? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I just had a question. Hi, I'm Otherness. I'm actually a lawyer amidst a lot of supply chain folks here. And I wanted to thinking in the context of the global supply chain, how you actually change your hiring and firing practices in countries outside the US, where this Zappos idea of hire slow and fire fast is not going to fly in Europe, in my jurisdictions in Latin America, where the reality is you have to offer them a contract and there's all kinds of requirements in there. So have you adapted your hiring policies and all of your recruiting to those realities where it doesn't work? Thank you.
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, supply chain being international, how do we deal with that?
I think we got to go to Ryan.
Ryan,
I got stuck with the tough one. Think good. It's incredibly complex, especially recruiting for a global organization that's growing very quickly. I think the first thing we have to really just acknowledge is that it's not wide brushstrokes, right? Like you actually need a different talent strategy for every country that you're operating in. It's also just as you think about like things like GDPR and how actually information is shared, that's becoming really complex as we manage people strategies, especially as like information can't leave some countries. So like all of a sudden, like now all of your applicants that you ever collected in China can't be in your ATS anymore. What we've had to really do is set up global teams that can really create sort of what is our standard best practice globally, and then where do we have to adapt from that for each region. And depending on size and scale of your organization, you might actually need to stand up some recruiting functions in region. It's getting quite complicated as you think about a global supply chain, where traditionally roles that were headquartered at the company's nucleus or at the headquarters office, now some of the work is actually being done closer to the factories. And so there's this sort of evolution of where is the work being done and where are the reporting lines, and then how do we actually distort for each of those markets. So we're in a very learning phase ourselves as we are now starting to do hiring from Canada, hiring managers sitting in Canada, but now the direct reports are sitting in Hong Kong, and really trying to create a seamless talent experience when we really know that by each individual market, it might take specific tailoring, not only in terms of your employee value proposition, but really how you operate legally within that country. So it is quite complex.
And Ryan, you likely have representation experts in those countries, because I know we're global as well, and it's a challenge. And I couldn't do the recruiting from here because I don't understand the norms and the cultures the way that the experts do there. So we definitely employ experts, and we listen to them. We have a global steering committee that helps us understand what the different countries operate, how they operate, and what the norms are. It's really interesting. It's really challenging. But that's part of the fun of creating solutions for all of these challenges that we face. Right?
Okay, so I think we have time for just one question, last question.
Hi, my name is Sam, and I'm a program alumni from Cohort 9. I would like to ask a question on behalf of all of the international students we have here. It's about sponsorship. So from my understanding, it's getting harder and harder to ask employers to sponsor the talents nowadays. And usually when I click that checkbox says, like, I need sponsorship for future, I would get rejection in 24 hours. So just kind of curious about, first, from the HR's perspective, why it's getting harder to ask employers to do the sponsorship? And secondly, from the student's perspective, what should we do or what can we do to give us a higher chance to find a job here in the US?
Yeah, I don't think it's the employer that's making it harder. I think it's regulations that are changing and the volume that's changing a little bit. I think the best answer is, as an individual, what benefit do you bring to our company as a potential employee? If you come aboard, are your projects stellar? Because I have to tell you that if you outperform and you live on the moon, we're going to try and get you here. Okay, so really that's it. Prepare yourself, understand what the projects look like, and make those projects as outstanding as they possibly can be. And I think employers will really bend to the process of bringing you aboard.
Having hired in the U.S. for a long time, there's only some roles that are actually allowable to give basis for. So when I was recruiting in the U.S., like we could often sponsor designers because of their skill set, but we couldn't sponsor someone for human resources or P&C. And so there's that component to it. Do you want to move to Canada?
Yeah.
Shameless plug, but Lululemon, we're based in Vancouver, and as an organization had to work with the Canadian government to actually get a special immigration permit. And that was solely to be able to bring human capital into Vancouver for skill sets that actually just don't exist at this point. We're now the largest retailer in Canada. There's not a whole lot of retailers that we haven't already fished a lot from, right? So we have to look at a global scale to bring in talent globally into the organization. And so that was something that Lululemon pursued itself. U.S. companies are a bit tied sometimes with what they can and cannot do, though, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Sam, for you, as this wasn't to your question, but to the students that came up and asked questions, a lot of times we think of leaders and we're looking up and we don't look in the mirror. And so a lot of times, like, there's two leaders, right, that I'm seeing in this room. We've been speaking to employers, and I felt like we've done maybe the students maybe a bit of a disservice because you're leaders as well. So like you have in psychology, I know there's academics in the room. I'm not a psychologist, I'm an accountant by trade, banker, now entrepreneur. So for you, you have what they call fluid intelligence, right? Like your ability, your knowledge, your ability to adapt. That's what you have to hone in on. What Brent talked about is that you have to be scrappy as well. Right? You have to take things from past generations. Like if you're not going to go and look at someone's LinkedIn and back channel to see who else worked there and do some of the legwork yourself, then are you actually going to be a leader within that organization 10, 20 years from now? Probably not, right? And then to the leaders in the room, to the employers in the room, there's crystallized intelligence. That's something you can't fake. That comes from experience. And so for us is that, like, I love that I have one of our mentors here, Noel, and he's like more crystallized intelligence. He saw someone from a character standpoint, young entrepreneurs, and came back and said, hey, look, I know that they have the will and the determination, you have the skill and the character. He had the skill and character, and we were able to come together. So as a young leader, you have to align yourself. I know we asked about how do you get like internships, how do I get the job offer? But once you get on the job, if you're in corporate, you have to find someone with that crystallized intelligence that they're going to take an onus in you. So there's an alignment of character and values, and then that is how you're going to catapult your career. If you don't do that, I don't care like if you're a rock star, no one's going to know about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Good
to our
question,
amazing
Sam.
panelists. We are
Yeah.
almost out of time. So I would just add a last 30-second closing statement here. First of all, thank you to our amazing
Thank
panelists.
you.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives, professional lives, to be here with us and sharing your expertise, especially our students. I want to talk to you. The last 30 seconds, I want to talk to you. Believe in yourself. Like Hakeem said, look in the mirror. That is the future leader of the future businesses of this world. Believe in yourself. Be kind. And always have your moral compass intact. Don't let anybody mess with you. You're young. You can achieve whatever you want the right way, right? Just because everybody's doing it doesn't make it right. Be the one person, stand out, do the right thing, and be kind. It goes a long way. It makes you happy as a person, but it also tells other people that you're a good human being. Because at the end of the day, we all want to work with good human beings, right? So be that person and believe in yourself. You have a lot of potential, and then find a mentor. Find a mentor. At the end of the day, you know, I think I am who I am because of my mentors. Because I was lucky to find the right people on my path as I was walking, as I was running. Sometimes I fell, sometimes I stumbled. You know, sometimes I was hurt, but there were mentors to pick me up, to sort of guide me in the right direction. So find those mentors, find those people in your life who you can talk to, who can guide you, and they're all around you. Sometimes you don't pay attention. There are mentors all around you. So pay attention to that and believe in yourself. That's the only thing I would tell my students is, because you guys are the future of this country, of this world, and supply chain is everything. That's your foundation for businesses. You're in the right field right now. You're in the right area. You're in the right career. So congratulations to you guys. All right, thank you very much.
Yeah.